just wrapping up our time here in Frankfurt. We just do 2 days of Eurobike. We did a little Resimmular factory tour. And after kind of sitting down at dinner last night, we were chatting with our friends from Curbside, and we were talking about how familiar and kind of homey we feel in Frankfurt. It's a very interesting scale of city, obviously quite a bit smaller than Toronto, but I think there's this really interesting harmony with bikes and cars here. It's not, I mean, there's definitely big car culture here. Of course, it's Germany. But there's this really interesting respect for cyclists and a lot of infrastructure. It's clearly very old too, which I think is definitely by our standards. Some of it's quite small and kind of moves around. But I think some of the really simple takeaways we saw, and I think my revelation was their traffic lights, which is every single space in the city. The traffic lights are specifically located on the side of the drivers. And this completely changes the dynamic of the intersection, because all of a sudden you don't have cars creeping forward because you have this space of respect for pedestrians and cyclists who are generally classified together. We end up having actually this very relaxing experience of crossing the road. You don't actually feel like someone's creeping up or trying to swing around a right turn, because they'll be easily 10, 15 feet back from the actual turn, right? What are your thoughts? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Frankfurt, I guess, is not necessarily known as a massive cycling city, on the world scale, where you think of Amsterdam or Paris or even, I guess, some more older German cities like Berlin. But yeah, that's what feels so familiar is you see many 3-lane, 6-lane roads in certain parts of the city for sure. But there's less conflict, I think, between all modes of transportation, whether it's pedestrians or cyclists. Way less honking, way less aggression on everyone's part. The very 1 or 2 times that we saw a car parked in a bike lane, people just sort of move around it, and it's not a huge deal, or there's not sort of a lot of ownership over the road. It's more of a shared experience. And cars give you the right of way a lot, and I think it just changes. You don't feel like you're at war when you're just trying to get to and from places.
I think actually on that note, I think one thing I found interesting is there is elevated bike lanes. There is kind of bollards. There is kind of little curbs you can maybe see in the background here. There's paint. We often joke paint's not infrastructure, but I think what was interesting is I'm often, as I've been kind of researching other cities of bike lanes and how bike lanes are treated, or how pedestrians are treated, often you see pedestrians and bikes effectively sharing, we're gonna call it a sidewalk, but you can clearly see it's one area is brick, the other is paved, and the paved has bike illustrations all over it, so it's very clear what it's for. But I think okay, someone parks in a bike lane, well, the pedestrians and the bikes are so used to working together because there's not actually physical separation there. So you can quite easily get around things, and it kind of makes it a little more of a harmonious flow, because oh, I just got on the sidewalk, not having to I have to jump onto the sidewalk to remove myself from the road, or I'm the other thing I also found is cars are really good at yielding. Everyone is really being conscientious of others' movement. And I think that was kind of what's eye-opening is, people see, oh, there's someone parked in a lane. They're not trying to pass you when you're trying to get around. There's a closure or construction. We saw all the same things we see at home. Construction blocking bike lanes. We saw parked cars in bike lanes. The other thing that kind of took me off guard is some of the older streets, where we're staying in Nord End, where effectively the sidewalks look massive and the cars just kind of are supposed to park on them partially. Yeah. They'll have sometimes a half and half where they have to pull up onto the curb. Which I also thought was kind of interesting. But I think that one note about, obviously we can't implement that because it's just every single traffic light being changed, but it just creates this level of understanding and respect that I think is quite interesting. And it really changes the dynamic. And honestly, walking around I've been filming B-roll for an hour and a half, and I just saw, it just felt calm, which is weird to be just sitting there filming cars. In Toronto, it feels chaotic, and it's it's my baseline, it's what I'm used to. But here I'm wow, there's still I will say, the other thing is car size is very different. We were shocked every time we saw a pickup truck. I saw one pickup truck in filming for an hour and a half. Most cars are compact. We don't do as many SUVs and things. There are obviously some here and there, but most people seem to favor compact cars, station wagons, you know, much more like small,
There's also
compact.
just like this, I don't think, at least from my experience of living in Toronto, Frankfurt doesn't feel like a concrete jungle the way that Toronto does. They have, I mean, really nice parks like this. There's one other park right near where we stayed that just has a lot of public space around, a lot of like third places, third locations where it's not your home and it's not your office or a place where you have to spend money to sit down at, like a coffee shop or a restaurant. You know, the number of benches in Frankfurt, I bet you quadruples the number in Toronto and even in a smaller city.
It's a lot of shared open public space, which is nice. And a lot of green public space that is like thoroughfare. Like we were saying, we're in effectively a median right now. There's this cool big art that we thought we should go check out before we leave. But there's literally these kind of desire lines, little paths where people are clearly traveling through, lots of gravel paths in the middle of like effectively we're in a, what is this, 5 lanes of traffic we're in the middle of. So 3 on our right, 2 on our left. And it's quite quiet, like maybe a big truck goes by, but like overwhelmingly it's like, this is a very like peaceful, tree-lined kind of boulevard. And it's like, this is obviously a lot of cars are moving through, but yeah, it's very interesting to kind of see how else it can look.
Yeah.
Especially with a much older city that's clearly been adapting for much longer than us, you know?
Yeah, and it's just a sign that, you know, we don't have to destroy all the cars and get rid of all of the driving. There is like a synergy that's like very possible. Yeah, and it just doesn't have to feel tense. I think a lot of us like commuting to work or anything, like you get a little anxious getting around drivers, you see aggression, you hear honking. Yeah, and it's just, I mean, we haven't been here for that long, but you just get a sense of calm when you're moving through the city, which is amazing.
100% agree. I think the calm feeling of a city is like the most underrated thing. And I think it comes a lot down to car noise, usually. Which, anyways, just some final thoughts from our trip. But if you've been following along, thanks so much. And what do you think? Do you think we should adopt, you know, what do we call that? Like a same side traffic signal? It makes a lot of sense, but I'd like to see it in the future, or even like something like for new development. So it would be good to, I mean, this is one of those things too, like obviously you can't uproot every traffic signal, but if you create policy to slowly implement it, it's not rocket science, it becomes very apparent, and I think it would also encourage people to just crowd intersections.
You could just not turn on the other side's traffic light. They wouldn't even have to uproot them. You could just turn them off.
Spin them around.
So that only the ones that are closest to you are the ones that you actually follow.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think the other big one that we've talked about before in some of our previous videos is right-hand turns on red. There's a lot of split signals and traffic like allowing them to turn right. And I think that is another huge thing for safety when you're actually trying to share the road. So you don't have this like, when it's a red, it's a red. And when you get the arrow, you go. And there's a huge amount of respect for traffic signals here, even among pedestrians.
Yeah.
Like that was, on our way over here, we saw one of the only instances of a pedestrian getting honked at because they crossed on a red. And I was like, whoa, we've been here for a week.
They also have, just because the tram system is so integrated into the city, they have stoplights specifically for like streetcar stops effectively. So if a streetcar is stopping and loading or unloading passengers, a green light will turn red. And cars will not pass on the side that people are getting on and off at, which is a thing that happens all the time, especially like working on College Street. The College streetcar will stop sort of seemingly in the middle of the road, and drivers will often fly by the doors, which is illegal and of course highly unsafe. And they've just essentially gotten rid of that problem by using more traffic lights. And they have lights for pedestrians, lights for cyclists. It just makes so much sense.
It's funny too, our elevated bike lanes on College do like have a reminiscent feel of that, but you realize there's still one whole lane of drop down full live traffic. And instead here what they would do is that's the extension of the lane. So you actually have the cars go up to meet the pedestrian level, so it's very apparent when they're entering the loading area.
Yeah.
And I think that is the one misstep we have. We're not willing to, put a curb in the middle, so then you have to like separate, you're not allowed to cut around, you have to wait and go up, there's the signaling and integrated, but it's a really it's well thought out, it's clearly established, it clearly works. We didn't see anyone blowing through those, because I walk along College Street every day and I see countless people running and pushing for the streetcars. And I think there's this patience that we just are missing, which at the end of the day, I think it's just, we all got to share the road.
I mean, we also part of, I think, the lack of patience from Torontonians is if you miss a streetcar, the next one is coming in 8-9 minutes. Yeah. Whereas here, if you miss it, the next one is coming in 3 or 4.
Yeah, it's very true.
And it's the same with the lights. The lights will change pretty quickly instead of having to wait a while for the rest of traffic to move around you. There's basically no jaywalking here, or jaywalking.
Jaywalking doesn't exist.
Right.
It's made up by the car.
People don't do it.
Yeah.
Getting around is just getting around.
A lot more also very calm traffic zones that they still do allow cars parking. There might be a one-way, but they'll be parking on both sides. But you can tell it's predominantly pedestrians, it's predominantly wide sidewalks, it's lots of cyclists, and also they're very cute little shopping areas that you want to be in, because everyone who is in a car in those spaces, they know it's not their space, but they are welcomed into it, and they are very courteous. Everyone was they drive super slow, they're a low speed zone, there's no need for big ridiculous speed bumps to calm everyone down. There's a mutual understanding that I think we kind of miss back home in Canada. Yeah. But before this alarm goes, maybe we should wrap it.
Very few speed bumps.
Yeah, very few speed bumps.
One.
Yeah.
One speed bump.
Very true. But anyways, we got a flight to catch, so we'll see you back at the shop.
Thanks, guys.